I have just really enjoyed these studies on encounters with Jesus over the past several weeks. I hope you have too. But it's just been really refreshing to me to go back and just reread these stories and think about them and meditate on them and just look at all the different things that we can learn from them. A lot of these stories, we can see ourselves in them. We can relate to the characters and the different situations and feelings that they have. And this is another one of those stories that we're going to look at this morning that I can really relate to. We're going to be studying three stories about Mary and Martha. And Mary and Martha were sisters. Martha was the oldest. They had a brother named Lazarus, and they lived in Bethany, just about 2 miles outside of Jerusalem. And this was a family of disciples of Jesus. All three of them were disciples of Jesus. And it was a family that Jesus had a special relationship with. And the first story that I want us to look at is one that probably is very familiar to you in Luke chapter 10. And it's the story about Mary and Martha inviting Jesus into their home. And in Luke chapter 10, beginning verse 38, it says, "As Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister named Mary who sat at the Lord's feet, listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, 'Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work myself? Tell her to help me.' 'Martha, Martha,' the Lord answered, 'you are worried and upset about many things, but only one thing is needed. And Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her.'" You know, here there's this invitation to Jesus to come into the home of Mary and Martha. He and his disciples were traveling. And Luke paints this picture for us that Mary went and sat at the feet of Jesus, listening to what he had to say. And, you know, I'm looking at this and I'm imagining that Mary had this deep yearning for spending time with Jesus. You know, she probably ran up and got, the front seat as Jesus was teaching the disciples. And she just wanted to be with Jesus. I imagine she probably thought he was the greatest thing in the world. And there was no other place she would want to be at this time than just sitting at the feet of Jesus. She wanted to hear every word Jesus had to say. She believed what Jesus said in Matthew 4:4, that man cannot live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God. You know, Jesus said in John 8:31-32 that if you abide in my word, then are you truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. I think about how Peter, when many of the disciples turned back and quit following Jesus, in John chapter 6, Jesus turned to him and said, "What about you? Do you want to leave too?" And Peter said, "To whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. We know and believe that you are the Holy One that has come from God." I believe Mary felt that about Jesus, that she knew that the words that Jesus spoke were words of God, that they were truth, that they were gracious and full of wisdom and learning. And so Mary wanted to be right at Jesus's feet, taking in every word that he had to say to them. I wonder sometimes if our actions display that same kind of yearning for Jesus. That, we really, really crave time with him. We just want to be with him alone and just listen to him and take in all of his words and just be built up and encouraged and challenged by the things that Jesus teaches. Do we yearn for Jesus the way that Mary did? Martha, on the other hand, was distracted by all the preparations. And I have to confess right now that I am just like Martha. That, I am so worried about getting everything in order and making sure that all the preparations are right. And sometimes I just get, frantic about making sure everything's in place and everything looks good and everything's ready to entertain the guests. And this is what Martha was doing. It wasn't that Martha didn't love Jesus as much as Mary did, or that Mary was more spiritual than Martha. She just had a different way of expressing it. And this really caught my attention when I was thinking about it, how that we're different people. We have different personalities. We were raised differently. We have different gifts. And so the idea here is that we need to understand that we're not all the same, that we're different, and that's okay. And it's okay to express our love to Jesus in different ways. A lot of times Christians judge other Christians because they don't do the same things that they do or that they think is most important. And I see Martha doing that in this story. Martha was upset with Mary, and she took it out on Jesus. And when you look at what Martha said there to Jesus, she was kind of accusing him of not really caring. Lord, don't you care? Don't you care, Lord, that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Don't you care? And when we get all wrapped up in ourselves and we lose our focus, it causes us to, be victims and to judge other people and to do all these other things. And I see this happening in Martha. She's feeling like she's the only one doing the work and nobody's there helping her. And how can you just sit there and let Mary, do nothing while I'm in there working away? Tell her to come help me. And when Jesus responds to her, I don't see this as a rebuke. I see this as gentle instruction. Martha, Martha. Oh, Martha. Martha, you are worried and upset about many things, but only one thing is needed, and Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. I think that sometimes we get distracted by good things and neglect the most important things. Martha, what she was doing was praiseworthy. I mean, she wanted to serve Jesus. She wanted to entertain him and make his visit with her the best visit that he had ever had. She wanted everything to be just perfect for him and his disciples. And it wasn't like she was doing something bad. She was doing something really good. I mean, it's good when Christians serve and that they take the time to do the best that they possibly can. But Jesus was pointing out something here, that what Mary was doing was the one thing that is really needed. She was sitting at the feet of Jesus, taking in the words of Jesus. That really there isn't anything more important than our spending time with Jesus and just listening to his words. and digesting them and applying them to our lives. This is absolutely needed. Listen, Jesus could do without, a really good meal, or, a really comfortable chair to sit in or something like that. But missing out on spending time with Jesus and not listening to his teachings, you're neglecting the most important thing in life. And Jesus was making that clear to Martha in a gentle way. Now, the second story that I want us to look at this morning about Mary and Martha include their brother Lazarus. And in John chapter 11, it says in verse 1, now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, Lord, the one you love is sick. Mary and Martha are sending word to Jesus, who is in a town not too far away, and they're asking for his help. Now, they don't say that. They simply say that the one you love, Lazarus, is sick. And they thought that that would probably be sufficient to get Jesus' attention and to cause him to want to come very quickly. Mary and Martha both believed that Jesus could heal Lazarus. No doubt they had heard stories and witnessed for themselves all the miracles that Jesus had done. They had saw Jesus heal the sick, to give sight to the blind, to cause the lame to walk again. They had no doubt that if Jesus could come, he could heal Lazarus. And so they were hoping that Jesus would come quickly and help Lazarus. They were hoping that the minute he got word, he would drop everything he was doing and start for Bethany to help Lazarus. And I think about how all of us have been in a similar situation before, feeling totally helpless and desperate. One time when my son was about 2 years old, we were missionaries in Antigua. He got dysentery and he was throwing up and diarrhea, and he was very, very sick. And we for a day or so watched him just get worse and worse. And so we took him to the doctor, and the doctor said, get him to the hospital right now or he's going to die. And I think those were her exact words. Get him to the hospital right now or he's going to die. And we were just scared to death. And we took him to the hospital, and the hospitals there in that small island were nothing like the ones we have here. They had open windows with no screens, and the kids were on cots, and they were all on one floor. There were not different rooms. They were just all lined up, all sick with different things. And it was a sad and sick situation. And we got there, and they literally tied my son to the bed. Tied his arms down and tied his feet down to the bed, and then put tubes in him and an IV and started pumping fluids in it to him to try to get him strong enough again and get him well. And then they wouldn't let us stay at the hospital with him. We had to go home and leave him there overnight. And I can tell you, I was so helpless and feeling so desperate that I just prayed all night, please God, please Lord, please don't let my son die. Please, Lord, please. And I remember just feeling so helpless and desperate and just just really completely trusting Jesus and just hoping that he would come to my rescue and make my son well again. And thank God he did get well. He was there for a couple days, but he did get well again. And I'm so grateful for that. But we've all been there before, where we just don't know what to do. There's nothing more we can do, and all we can do is trust God. All we can do is ask him to help us. And this was the state of mind that Mary and Martha were in when they sent word to Jesus to come quickly and help Lazarus. But the story goes on to say that when he heard this, Jesus said, "This sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it." Jesus loved Martha and her sister Mary and Lazarus. Yet, when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. Now, try to picture that in your mind. Mary and Martha are frantic. They're desperate for Jesus to come and help them. They're expecting him to come right away. And then Jesus purposely waited until Lazarus had actually died. Why would he do that? Well, I can tell you, it wasn't because he was too busy. And it wasn't because he didn't care. Because he loved Martha and Mary and Lazarus. In fact, 3 times in chapter 11, he says that he loved them. Martha and Mary were so deeply disappointed when Jesus arrived that he had not come sooner. You remember how this story goes? Martha hears that Jesus is coming and she runs out to him. You remember those desperate words that she said? When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. "Lord," Martha said to Jesus, "if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now, God will give you whatever you ask." Lord, why didn't you come sooner? Why did you delay? I mean, they knew that Jesus could have gotten there earlier. Why didn't he come? And you know, Mary went out and said the very same thing. "Lord, if only you'd come sooner, you could have saved my brother." And you know, the point I get from this is that we don't always get what we hope for. But we can be certain that we will always get what is best. You know how this story goes on, and when Mary gets out there and the other disciples who had come to comfort her in her mourning follow Mary out to see Jesus, and Mary pours out her heart to Jesus and she's weeping, and all the other disciples are weeping. Verse 35 tells us that Jesus wept. Jesus wept. Shortest verse in the Bible. Why did Jesus weep? It wasn't because Lazarus died, because he was about to raise Lazarus from the dead anyway. Some have said maybe it was because he felt so bad bringing Lazarus back from heaven to life here on this miserable planet that he wept. But I don't think that's the answer either. I believe he wept because it broke his heart to see Martha and Mary weeping, that he couldn't hold it back when he saw them so hurt and so deeply sorrowful, that he was moved by that, and it caused him to weep as well. But what we learn from this story is that we don't always get what we hope for. I mean, they wanted Jesus to get there quickly and to, lay hands on him and heal him so that he could go on with life. That didn't happen. When Jesus got there, he had already been buried. He was in the tomb for 4 days. And Jesus said, "Take me to the tomb." And Mary said, "You don't want to go there. His body has already begun decomposing and there's a stench." And Jesus said, "Take me there." And he went there and he had them roll the stone back and he called forth to Lazarus, "Come out, Lazarus." And he came out alive again. We don't always get what we hope for, but listen, we can be certain that we will always get what is best. That's what Romans 8:28 is all about. That God works all things together for good for those who love him and are called according to his purpose. The last story I want us to look at about Mary and Martha takes place about 2 months after Lazarus was raised from the dead. And in John chapter 12, beginning in verse 1, it says, 6 days before the Passover, Jesus arrived at Bethany, where Lazarus lived, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. Here a dinner was given in Jesus's honor. Martha served while Lazarus was among those reclining at the table with him. Then Mary took a pint of pure nard, an expensive perfume. She poured it on Jesus's feet and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. Here we see a dinner that is given in Jesus's honor. They wanted to show their appreciation to Jesus for all that he had done for them. And it says that Martha served while Lazarus reclined with Jesus. Here again, we see Martha serving. And I think about how that was God's gift to Martha. Her gift was serving. That's what she knew how to do. That's what she was, that was her passion, to be the best servant she could possibly be. And that's what she was doing. She was serving Jesus and honoring him with her service. And it says Lazarus reclined with Jesus at the table with the other disciples. And that's where he should be. That Lazarus was at the center of this meal that Jesus was having in his honor. And I just picture Lazarus talking about how sick he was before he died and how scared he was and how worried his sisters were for him, and sharing these stories with all the disciples around the table and just looking into Jesus's eyes and maybe a tear shed and just saying, "Lord, thank you for saving me, for rescuing me." It just makes me think of Jerry Nance and all the prayers that we prayed for him. Mm-hmm. And to think that he was on the edge of death and God gave him a donor heart and got him in at the top of the list so that he might have that surgery and have a new heart and a new life. And I see in Jerry Lazarus. And I just know that in Jerry's heart, there's nothing he could ever do or say enough for his thankfulness to God for rescuing him. The point is this: when a person truly experiences the love and mercy of Jesus, they feel compelled to honor him. They feel compelled to thank him, to praise him, to serve him, to do whatever they can to lift him up and to show him how grateful they are. Do you feel that way this morning? I mean, when you look back at your life and you look at those times that Jesus has brought you through those really difficult times, doesn't that inspire you to want to serve him and honor him with your life? Man, I feel that way. When I look back at my life before becoming a Christian, and just how messed up my life was and how Jesus rescued me. And not only rescued me, but gave me such a wonderful life. I cannot help but honor him and praise him for all that he's done for me. I will do that till my death. I want people to know that Jesus saved my life, and he can save yours too. The story didn't end there, though. Mary comes in. And Mary anoints the feet of Jesus with expensive perfume. And you have to underline expensive, because this perfume was worth a lot of money. And in the other parallel accounts, it says the disciples were perturbed by this and wonder why Mary would waste that, because it was worth a lot of money. But in this text, in John chapter 12, it points out that Judas Iscariot, the one who would betray Jesus, was the one who brought up this criticism of Mary. That he pointed out that Mary could have sold that perfume, which was worth a year's wages. That's how expensive it was. She could have sold that, Judas said, and given the money to the poor. It was wasted pouring it on Jesus. And it tells us that it wasn't that Judas was really worried about the poor, but that he was the one who took care of the purse, and that he would dip into the purse every so often and take money for himself. It was his greed. But Jesus rebuked that. And in Matthew chapter 26, verses 8 through 13, we have the parallel account of this, which goes into more detail. Here in John chapter 12, it says that Jesus said, "Leave her alone," told Judas, "leave her alone. Quit criticizing what she has done. It was intended that she should save this perfume for the day of my burial. You will always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me." And in Matthew chapter 26, Matthew gives some more detail to this, and I want to read it to you as we close out here. In Matthew chapter 26, because when the disciples saw this, they were indignant. Why this waste, they asked. This perfume could have been sold at a high price and the money given to the poor. Aware of this, Jesus said to them, "Why are you bothering this woman? She has done a beautiful thing to me. The poor you will always have with you, but you will not always have me." Now listen to this. "When she poured this perfume on my body, she did it to prepare me for burial. I tell you the truth, wherever this gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her." Jesus immortalized Mary for this great act of love. You know, this was an amazing sacrifice that Mary made, honoring Jesus, because she so loved him and appreciated him. And he would soon go to the cross. And she was preparing him for his death, his burial. You know, in the series on encounters with Jesus, story after story after story, we see the impact that Jesus had on people's lives and how it radically changed them. We saw it in the life of Philip and Andrew and Peter and John, the demon-possessed man, the woman caught in adultery, Nicodemus, Zacchaeus, and here Mary and Martha and Lazarus. When Jesus touched people's lives, it changed them forever. And I want to just leave you with this thought. What about you? What about you? Have you had an encounter with Jesus where you've experienced his love and mercy in a way that it just moved you? It moved you to want to serve him, to honor him, to sacrifice for him, to sit at his feet and learn from him, to follow him in every way.